You ever get that sinking feeling in your gut? That quiet whisper, telling you something's off, but you can't quite figure out what? Yeah, that's how it started with Emma. On the outside, we looked like we had it all together. Hell, I thought we did too. We'd been together for years, built a life side by side, shared everything, or at least that's what I believed. But looking back now, I see just how clueless I was. It began with little things, subtle changes in the way she behaved. At first, I shrugged it off. We all go through phases, right? She started working late, talking about all these new training sessions, conferences, and meetings, stuff she never used to mention before. One night, I asked her, "Why the sudden increase in workload? You've never been this busy." She brushed it off, saying it was all about career advancement, and like a fool, I let it slide. Stupid, I know. I'll never forget the night it truly hit me. I was lounging on the couch, flipping through channels, when Emma came home, even later than usual. She was wearing this new dress, way too fancy for some so-called business dinner. Her hair was done up differently too, like she'd put in extra effort. I half joked, "What, trying to impress someone at the office or something?" She laughed it off, but I saw it, that quick flicker in her eyes. It was like I had unknowingly hit too close to the truth, closer than either of us wanted to admit. And it wasn't just the late nights or the fancy outfits. She was pulling away, acting distant, getting into new things that had nothing to do with me. We used to be inseparable, but now she was off in her own little world. One day, she mentioned she'd joined some fitness center. I didn't think much of it, figured she wanted to stay in shape. But soon, she was going more and more often, and when I asked if I could tag along one day, she shut that down fast. "It's just my time," she said. Her time up? Yeah, whatever. Then came the receipts. I'll never forget finding those. She left her purse on the kitchen counter one day. I wasn't snooping, not intentionally anyway, but when I was cleaning up, her purse tipped over, spilling out a bunch of receipts. They were from restaurants I didn't recognize. Expensive places, too. Now, Emma has always liked the finer things, but she never mentioned these dinners. Later, I casually brought it up like, "Hey, I found this receipt from that new place downtown." "How was it?" She didn't even blink, mumbled something about a work dinner, and walked off. That's when it hit me. She was hiding something. We stopped spending as much time together. It wasn't like we didn't talk at all, but our conversations felt shallow, forced. I'd ask how her day was, and she'd throw out a one-word answer before retreating to the bedroom or heading out for one of her evening runs. Yeah, right? Evening runs. I wasn't born yesterday. Even David, my best friend, noticed something was up. One night, we were having a few beers, and he asked, "Hey man, is everything cool with you and Emma? You seemed a bit off lately." I tried to brush it off, same way I'd been doing with everything else, but he didn't let it go. "Come on, man. I've known you long enough to tell when something's eating at you." I hesitated, but eventually it all spilled out. How distant she'd been, the late nights, the new clothes, the strange routines. It just didn't sit right. David took a long swig of his beer, leaned back, and said, "You need to look into that, man. It doesn't sound good." That's when reality hit me hard. My best friend could see it, what I had been too scared to face. Something was happening, and I couldn't ignore it anymore. The worst part? She wasn't even trying that hard to cover it up. Some nights she'd come home late, looking drained, but not the kind of tired you get from working all day. No, this was a different kind of exhaustion, the kind that comes from spending time with someone who isn't your husband. I didn't want to believe it. I wanted to convince myself I was just overthinking things, being paranoid. But deep down, I knew. I just wasn't ready to admit it yet. Then there were the out-of-town conferences. Suddenly, she had to travel every other week for work. "Can I come with you? We could turn it into a little weekend getaway," I'd suggest. She'd laugh it off, tell me it was strictly business, no time for fun. But come on, who was she kidding? I'm not an idiot. I knew something was up, and if I didn't get to the bottom of it soon, it was going to eat me alive. And don't even get me started on the nights out. We used to go out together, grab dinner, maybe catch a movie. But those nights became rare, replaced by her so-called girls' nights, or drinks with coworkers. At first, I didn't think much of it, but soon it became a weekly thing. She'd be out late, and I'd be home, just sitting there, wondering what the hell had happened to my marriage. I'd confront her sometimes, but it always ended the same way. "You're being ridiculous," she'd snap, or hit me with the classic, "Why don't you trust me?" She'd twist things around, making it seem like I was the problem, like I was some insecure idiot for even questioning her. Every time, I let it go, but that gnawing doubt, that never left. So, there I was, a guy who thought he had everything sorted out. Great wife, steady life, the whole package. But suddenly, it felt like the ground was crumbling beneath me. And the worst part? I wasn't even sure if anything I thought we had was real anymore. A few more weeks of feeling like I was going insane, and I couldn't take it. Something was wrong with Emma, and it wasn't just the late nights or the new outfits. It was the way she treated me, cold, distant, like I was just a roommate she barely tolerated. The affection? Gone. Late night talks in bed? Forget it. Hell, there wasn't even any intimacy left. It was like she'd flipped a switch and shut everything down. I couldn't stop myself. I started snooping. I hated myself for it, but what choice did I have? The woman I married was slipping through my fingers, and I had to know why. One night, while she was in the shower, I grabbed her phone. I told myself it would just be a quick look, nothing more. But what I found, man, that's when everything shattered. There was a message thread buried under some lame work contact named Tom. At first, I figured it was just another colleague, no big deal. But then I scrolled up, and what I saw, it was burned into my brain. These messages weren't about work. Not even close. They started out playful, flirty even, but as I kept scrolling, they turned graphic. Real graphic. My hands were trembling as I read through their plans to meet up, late-night chats about how she couldn't wait to see him again. And then the photos. Yeah, there were pictures. Emma in lingerie, posing, and Tom, flexing shirtless like some wannabe gym bro, clearly a lot younger than me. I felt like throwing up, but instead of losing it right then and there, I did something I never imagined I'd do. I took a deep breath, saved the messages, and quietly put the phone back. I didn't say a word to her. Not yet. That's when it hit me. I needed more than just these texts. I needed solid proof. I wasn't about to jump into this half-cock, so I went full-on paranoid husband and decided to install cameras. Yeah, I know. It sounds nuts, but at this point, I didn't give a damn. I had to know for sure. So I went out, bought a few hidden cameras, and set them up around the house while she was out. One in the living room, one in the kitchen, and yeah, I even put one in the bedroom. I wasn't proud of it, but I needed to see what was really happening when I wasn't around. The first few days? Nothing. Just Emma going about her routine. Late nights, coming home, heading straight to bed without even saying goodnight. But then, about a week later, it happened. She told me she had to stay late at work again, another lie about some meeting with a client. I didn't believe a word of it, but I played along, kissed her goodbye, told her to take care, and then sat down with my laptop to watch the footage. Hours passed, and nothing. The house was empty. But then, around 9 p.m., there he was, Tom. The bastard strolled right into my house like he owned the place. And Emma? She was right behind him, laughing, giggling like some love-struck teenager. I just sat there, my heart pounding out of my chest, watching them head straight into our bedroom. It didn't take long. They didn't even try to hide it. Right there, in the bed we shared, she was with him. My wife. With another man. I felt sick to my stomach. I wanted to storm in, throw them both out, scream at her, but I couldn't move. I was frozen in place, watching my life unravel in real time. It felt like a nightmare, one I couldn't wake up from. After they were done, yeah, they didn't exactly rush. Tom left. Didn't even bother staying the night. He just zipped up, kissed her, and walked out like it was nothing. And Emma? She didn't look the slightest bit guilty. She cleaned herself up, got dressed, and went off to her late-night work meeting as if nothing had happened. I couldn't believe it. The woman I'd been married to for years, the woman I thought I'd grow old with, was screwing around with some younger guy in our bed like it was just another day. That's when the rage hit me. Not the kind of anger where you just punch a wall or throw something. No, this was a deep, burning fury. The kind that simmers under your skin, crawling through your bones, eating at you from the inside out. I knew right then, this wasn't just about her cheating. This was about how I was going to make her pay for what she'd done to me. But I didn't confront her. Not yet. I wasn't going to act rashly. I needed more. I needed to utterly destroy her. The next morning, I woke up like everything was normal. Emma was all smiles, kissed me on the cheek before heading out to her fitness center, which I now knew was just an excuse to see Tom. I played along, nodded, wished her a good workout, and as soon as she walked out the door, I started planning my next move. First thing I did was check her phone again. More messages. And this time they were planning a trip together. A trip. She had told me it was for a work conference next month, but surprise, surprise, no work involved. It was just her and Tom, heading off to some fancy hotel for a weekend getaway, while I stayed home like the clueless idiot she thought I was. I wasn't about to let that happen, not without putting up a fight. So I started gathering everything I could, every message, every picture, every little piece of dirt I could dig up. If this was all going to come crashing down, I was going to make damn sure it burned to the ground. There was no way I was going to let her walk away from this unscathed. I even went as far as tracking her movements. I installed GPS on her phone without her noticing, monitoring every single step she took. Whenever she went to the gym, whenever she met up with Tom, I knew I wasn't going to miss a second of it. The worst part? I still hadn't confronted her. Not because I didn't want to, but because I needed to hurt her as deeply as she was hurting me. And trust me, I had a plan for that. She had no idea, but her day of reckoning was coming. And when it did, there wouldn't be any turning back. I had all the proof now. I'd watched it happen with my own eyes. Emma and Tom screwing in my bed like they owned the place. And the texts, the photos, the endless lies. I had it all. But instead of losing my temper and blowing up, I knew I had to play it smart. I couldn't just go off in a rage, no matter how much I wanted to. To destroy her completely, I needed time. I needed patience. So, I kept collecting everything. I combed through her phone again, taking screenshots of every dirty message, every suggestive picture. I saved the videos from the hidden cameras, labeling them for safekeeping. I dug out every suspicious receipt she had stuffed into her purse and made sure I had photos of them too. Fancy hotels, high-end dinners she never bothered to mention. Every last bit was saved. If she was going to blow up my life, I was going to burn hers to ashes. And during all this, something unexpected happened. I found myself getting closer to someone else, Rebecca. She was a colleague of mine, someone I'd known for a few years. We'd always been friendly, but nothing ever crossed the line. That is until now. With all the chaos happening with Emma, I started leaning on Rebecca more and more. It started out harmless, just grabbing coffee after work, venting about the stress of the job, life in general. But as the weeks went on, I found that being around her was easy. She didn't have that icy, distant vibe Emma had been throwing my way for months. Rebecca actually listened. She seemed to care. And yeah, I could tell she was interested. There was something in the way she'd smile when I talked, or how her hand lingered just a little too long on mine when we said goodbye. At first, I didn't want to involve her in all of this. I thought it would only complicate things. But the truth was I needed someone in my corner. Someone who wasn't just standing on the sidelines watching my life implode. And Rebecca, she stepped right up. She became my emotional anchor, my confidant. Slowly but surely, our relationship started shifting. It wasn't just about grabbing coffee anymore. One night, after a few too many drinks, I broke down and told her everything. I laid it all out, the affair, the cameras, the endless lies. I half expected her to be freaked out, maybe even back away from me. But instead, she leaned in closer. "James, you don't deserve this," she said softly, but with this intensity in her eyes. "You deserve someone who actually gives a damn about you, someone who respects you. She's garbage." I won't lie, hearing someone say that out loud about Emma, it felt good, really good. Before long, Rebecca became part of my revenge plan. At first, it was small things. I'd tell her about the latest bit of evidence I found, another sleazy text Emma and Tom had exchanged. We'd laugh about how pathetic they were, how clueless Emma must be to think she could keep getting away with this. But as time went on, I realized Rebecca could play a bigger role in all this. And honestly, I wanted her to. Meanwhile, I kept tabs on Emma. With the GPS tracker on her phone, I could pinpoint her location at any moment. Tom wasn't just some casual fling. They were meeting up regularly. At the gym, at fancy restaurants, at his place. I studied their patterns, figured out their routine. It was like this twisted game of cat and mouse, and I was determined to come out on top. Of course, there were some close calls. There was one time I ran into Tom at the gym. I hadn't expected it, but there he was lifting weights without a care in the world. He didn't recognize me, but I knew him. Watching him laugh and joke with his buddies, knowing full well he was screwing my wife behind my back, it took everything in me not to walk over and punch him in the face right then and there. But I didn't. I kept my cool, because this wasn't just about a quick outburst of anger. This was about revenge. Real, calculated revenge. And when it came down to it, Emma and Tom weren't going to know what hit them. There was another time at work. Tom and Emma had some event or meeting. I wasn't entirely sure what it was, but they were both there, all professional and polished in front of everyone else. I watched from a distance, keeping my cool, while they flirted in that subtle, secretive way, sharing inside jokes like they were the only two people in the room. The tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife, but I stayed calm. I had to. I wasn't quite ready to make my move just yet, but that time was coming, real soon. Meanwhile, things with Rebecca were getting closer by the day. What had started as her being my emotional support had turned into something much more. It's funny how life plays out, isn't it? My marriage was collapsing right in front of me, but here I was finding something new with someone who actually cared about me. One night, after another long day of pretending everything was fine with Emma, Rebecca invited me over for dinner. I could tell this wasn't just about a meal. We both knew where it was heading. When I showed up at her place, all the pretense was gone. The conversation flowed effortlessly. The wine was poured freely, and before I knew it, I was in her bed. And it wasn't just about the sex. It was about everything Emma had stopped being: warmth, affection, someone who genuinely cared. For the first time in a long time, I felt wanted. I felt alive again. Yeah, maybe part of it was about revenge, too. It felt good knowing I had something Emma couldn't take away from me. Someone who was actually on my side, someone who was real. Rebecca was all of that, and more. But this whole ordeal? Far from over. I kept gathering my evidence, knowing exactly where Emma and Tom were planning to go next. They had this trip lined up, a supposed work conference in another city. But now I had all the details. The hotel, the dates. I knew exactly what they were up to, and when the time was right, I was going to drop the hammer on both of them. And Rebecca? She was going to be right by my side when it all came crashing down. I'd been sitting on that mountain of evidence for weeks now, biding my time, waiting for the perfect moment. The texts, the photos, the videos, every dirty little secret Emma thought she had hidden was stored away in my phone, ready to tear her life apart. I thought about confronting her 100 times, just throwing it all in her face and watching her break. But that would have been too easy. She deserved far worse than a quick blow-up. She needed to be destroyed completely. That's when the idea hit me. Destroying her wasn't just about ending the marriage or taking her to the cleaners financially. No, that wouldn't cut it. I wanted to ruin her reputation. I wanted everyone to know exactly who Emma was, the cheating, lying wife who thought she could fool everyone. I wanted to drag her through the mud in front of her friends, her colleagues, her entire world. Taking it public seemed insane at first. I mean, who does that, right? But then again, who plants hidden cameras in their own house to catch their wife cheating? I was way beyond worrying about what was normal. So, I spent the next few days putting my plan together. I compiled everything: screenshots of the texts, photos of her and Tom cozying up, videos from the cameras in our bedroom. I even saved those receipts from the fancy dinners and hotels. Every single piece of evidence painted the full picture of just how far she'd gone behind my back. When I had everything ready, I created some anonymous accounts on social media and a few shady gossip forums. I wasn't going to dump everything at once. That would have been too obvious. No, I wanted it to spread slowly like a virus. So, I started small, posting a few texts under the title. Guess what my wife's been up to? I didn't even mention her name at first. I just let the evidence speak for itself. At first, nothing major happened. A few people commented, calling her names, some offering sympathy for the anonymous husband. It was almost disappointing how low-key the response was. But then I dropped the real bomb. The video. It was just a few seconds of footage from our bedroom, showing Emma and Tom in the act. I posted it with the caption, "Caught in the act." That's when everything took off. The video spread faster than I ever thought possible. It didn't take long for someone to recognize Emma. By the end of the day, her name was being passed around, and the comments were pouring in. People started tagging her friends, her co-workers. It was like watching a wildfire rip through her entire social circle. Slowly but surely, the scandal started reaching the people who really mattered in her life. The first signs of her world falling apart came the very next day. When I got home from work, Emma was on the phone, pale as a ghost, her voice trembling. "What do you mean it's online?" she asked, pacing back and forth in the kitchen. I couldn't hear what the person on the other end was saying, but I didn't need to. I knew exactly what was happening. Someone had seen the video. Someone had forwarded the texts. And now the guilt was finally creeping up on her. I stood there, watching her panic, knowing full well that this was just the beginning. She hung up, hands trembling, and for the first time, I saw real panic in her eyes. She didn't even glance in my direction. Instead, she darted for her phone, frantically scrolling through her messages and social media, trying to figure out just how bad things had gotten. Her world was starting to collapse, and she had no clue that I was the one pulling the strings. Then the call started. First, it was her boss. I was in the next room, listening as she fumbled her way through some pathetic excuse. "It's not what it looks like. I swear. I can explain." But what could she possibly say? That the woman in the video wasn't her? That it was all some kind of mix-up? It was pitiful watching her grasp at straws, trying to salvage whatever was left of her dignity. The next few days were brutal for her. The scandal spread like wildfire through her workplace. Colleagues who used to be her friends were suddenly keeping their distance, asking questions, distancing themselves. People unfollowed her on social media, quietly pretending they never knew her. And Tom? The moment things started getting ugly, that coward backed away too. He didn't want anything to do with her once the heat was on. I remember overhearing one of their conversations. She was sobbing, practically begging him to stand by her, but he couldn't have cared less. "Emma, I can't do this," he said, cold as ice. "I've got too much to lose. I can't be associated with this." I almost laughed out loud. The guy who'd been screwing her behind my back was now abandoning her when she needed him most. It was glorious. Watching Emma's life disintegrate before my eyes, I won't lie, it felt damn good. Every call she got, every time she checked her phone and saw another comment or message from someone cutting ties, I felt this deep sense of satisfaction. She was finally getting what she deserved, but I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. As the scandal spread, Emma's job hung by a thread. It didn't take long for her boss to call her in with a stern warning. "We can't have this kind of behavior reflecting on the company." I knew it was only a matter of time before she was out the door. She tried to fight it, of course, ran to HR, tried to play the victim, blamed the stress of the situation. But there was no escaping the truth. The evidence was overwhelming. This wasn't just some rumor. It was cold, hard proof. The texts, the photos, the videos. She couldn't talk her way out of this. The day she got fired, I knew it was coming. I came home to find her sitting at the kitchen table, her head in her hands, quietly sobbing. "They let me go," she whispered, barely looking up. "I lost my job." I didn't say a word. I just stood there, watching as she unraveled, This woman who had betrayed me in every possible way, now facing the fallout of her own actions. The best part? She still had no idea I was the one who had set this whole thing in motion. She thought it was some random leak, a mistake that spiraled out of control. Tom had already bailed. He wasn't answering her calls anymore, and he certainly wasn't showing up to offer her any comfort. She was on her own, and she knew it. And me? I wasn't finished yet. There was still one more piece to the puzzle. One final move to ensure she would never recover from this. By the time Emma finally tried to talk to me, it was too late. The damage had been done. I had watched her world crumble in front of me, her career destroyed, her friends abandoning her one by one, and Tom? Long gone. He'd ditched her the moment the scandal broke wide open. She was alone, desperate, and only then did she come crawling back, looking for forgiveness. It was pathetic. She sat me down in the living room one evening, tears in her eyes, and started her rehearsed monologue. The same old lines about how she was sorry, how she never meant to hurt me, how she made a mistake. I could barely keep a straight face. She was sitting across from me, trying to convince me that it had all been some terrible misunderstanding, as if the affair, the lies, and the videos could be swept under the rug with a few sobs. She even tried to spin some story about how things had been so hard at work and how stress had pushed her into making bad choices. I nearly walked out halfway through, but I stayed for one reason. I wanted to hear her beg. And beg she did. "James, please," she whimpered, her voice cracking as she reached for my hand. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen. We can work through this. We can—" I pulled my hand away before she could even touch me. The coldness in my voice surprised even me. "There's nothing to work through, Emma. It's over." I wasn't interested in her excuses. I wasn't going to sit there and let her rewrite history. I had already made up my mind the moment I saw Tom walk into our bedroom weeks ago. Hell, I had probably made up my mind long before that. There was no forgiveness here, no second chances. She had destroyed our marriage, and now she was going to lose everything else too. When I told her I'd filed for divorce, she lost it. She cried, pleaded, tried every trick in the book to guilt-trip me into rethinking it, but I didn't budge. It was over. I'd made sure this divorce was going to be swift and brutal. I had all the ammunition I needed, the texts, the videos, the receipts. This wasn't going to be some clean break. I was going to take everything, and she knew it. And that look in her eyes, the realization that she'd lost, that was the best part of all. The legal process wasn't kind to Emma, and honestly, I didn't make it any easier. She fought back at first, consulted with lawyers, probably thinking she could hold on to her share of the assets. But the evidence was stacked way too high against her. Every time she thought she had a shot, I'd come back with more proof. I played it methodically, laying everything out in the courtroom, piece by piece, without a shred of mercy. The judge barely had to think it over. It was clear who was in the right. She lost a huge chunk of what we'd built together. The house? I kept it. The shared property? Gone. Our savings? I made sure she walked away with the bare minimum. I wasn't being petty, no. I was just making sure she felt every inch of the fallout. Meanwhile, Emma was scrambling, trying to salvage what little she had left. She reached out to her friends for help, but by then, no one wanted anything to do with her. She was toxic, and they all knew it. The few who hadn't already ghosted her quickly backed off when they saw the evidence for themselves. I made sure they did. It wasn't just about wrecking her life. I wanted her erased from mine, from everyone's. The fallout with Tom was just as satisfying. At first, he tried to play it off, acting like the scandal would blow over. But when the heat turned up and his reputation started getting dragged through the mud, he bailed. I overheard a few of their last phone calls. Her crying and pleading with him to stick around, to face the mess they'd made together. But Tom? Cold and distant, just like I knew he'd be. "I can't do this, Emma," he told her. "I've got too much on the line. I can't get caught up in this." I almost laughed. The guy who was so confident screwing my wife couldn't run fast enough when things went south. By the time the divorce was finalized, Emma had nothing left. No job, no friends, and certainly no future with Tom. Just the broken pieces of the life she thought she could build by betraying me. And me? I was moving on. I bought a new house. Nothing big, just a cozy place where I could start fresh. It was a symbol, really a clean break from everything that had tied me to Emma. She could keep the memories, the guilt, the wreckage of what she'd done. I didn't want any of it. And through it all, Rebecca was my anchor. What started as emotional support had turned into something deeper, something real. She'd helped me get through the roughest parts of the divorce, constantly reminding me that I wasn't the one who destroyed the marriage. I hadn't done anything wrong. Every time the weight of the situation felt unbearable, Rebecca was there to keep me grounded, to remind me that I deserved better. We started spending more and more time together as the divorce process dragged on. She'd come over after work, cook dinner, and we'd talk about everything except Emma. Being with Rebecca felt like stepping into a new life. The chaos of the past finally seemed to fade, and she was the calm I hadn't realized I needed. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It wasn't about using her to hurt Emma. What we had was real. The day the divorce was finalized, Rebecca and I celebrated. Nothing grand, just a quiet night at my new place with a bottle of wine and the overwhelming relief that I was free. Free from the lies, the betrayal, and the toxic mess that my marriage had become. Emma tried reaching out a few times after the dust settled, but I didn't respond. What was the point? There was nothing left to say. She'd made her bed, and now she had to lie in it. Alone, disgraced, with no one to turn to. Meanwhile, I'd moved on, and it felt good. Damn good. The day I walked out of the courthouse with those divorce papers in hand, it felt like I'd finally stepped out of a dark tunnel. I stood outside for a moment, staring at the papers, then folded them away. It was done. The weight I'd been carrying for so long, years even, was finally gone. I was free from Emma, free from the lies, and free from the mess our life had become. And I wasn't alone. Rebecca was standing there beside me, smiling quietly like she always did. She never gloated about the divorce, never made it seem like it was some kind of victory for her. She just supported me, stayed by my side, and kept me grounded when everything felt like it was spiraling. That's when I realized this wasn't some rebound. She was real. She was there for the long haul. We decided it was time for a fresh start. Staying in the same city, surrounded by the same memories, the same places that reminded me of Emma, didn't make any sense. So, Rebecca and I made a plan. Within a few months, we packed up and moved to a different city, leaving the past behind. Moving with Rebecca was like breathing again. We found a small but charming house, not extravagant, but it was ours. Together, we built a new routine, something easy, something peaceful. There was no more tension, no more waiting for the next betrayal. Just life, simple and good. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I was truly happy. That's when it hit me. How much I had been carrying around all that anger, all that pain from the past. But now, it was gone. I didn't feel bitter anymore. I didn't feel like I needed to keep looking over my shoulder, waiting for the next thing to blow up. Emma was just a chapter that had ended, and I had finally closed the book for good. A few months after the move, I took a big step and opened my own marketing firm. It was something I'd dreamed about for years, but never had the guts, or maybe the time, to actually go after. But with Rebecca pushing me to take that leap, I finally did. Business was slow at first, sure, but it picked up. And more than just a financial boost, it gave me something I hadn't felt in a long time, a sense of purpose, something that wasn't tied up in the wreckage of my past. I'd still catch up with some of my old friends every now and then. These were the people who had seen me at my absolute worst, during the collapse of my marriage, the nights I couldn't sleep because of the rage, the confusion. But now, they saw a different me, a stronger me, someone who had come out the other side. They met Rebecca, and it was instant. Everyone loved her. I remember one night, we were all having drinks, and my buddy Chris pulled me aside, a big grin on his face. "Man, "You look happier than I've seen you in years," he said, tapping his beer against mine. "You did good." And you know what? He was right. I was happier. I had my life back. More than that, I had something better. I had Rebecca. I had a business that was actually doing well. I had a future that wasn't clouded by all the anger and betrayal that defined my time with Emma. As for Emma, well, she didn't bounce back so well. I still heard things here and there. Word gets around. She tried to put her life back together after the scandal, but her reputation was beyond repair. The video, the messages, they followed her wherever she went. She couldn't shake it. She lost her job. Most of her friends disappeared. And as for Tom, he was long gone. The moment things started to spiral, he cut ties with her and never looked back. She tried reaching out to old colleagues, hoping to rebuild her career, but everywhere she turned, doors slammed shut. No one wanted to be associated with her. There was one final time she tried to reach out to me. I wasn't shocked. Emma was desperate now, and desperation makes people do crazy things. She sent me this long-winded email, pages of apologies, regret, going on about how much she had lost, how she had no one left. She wanted to meet up, to talk things through, to see if we could make peace. I stared at that email for a long time, thought about everything we'd been through, thought about what she'd done, but in the end I didn't respond. There was no need. I didn't hate her anymore. I just didn't care. She was a part of my past, a chapter I'd already closed. I wasn't about to reopen it. So I deleted the email, blocked her, and that was the end of it. And you know what? It felt good. No, it felt great. Rebecca and I settled into this new life like we'd been doing it forever. I'd wake up in the mornings, have coffee with her before heading off to the office, and everything just felt normal. No ghosts from the past. No lingering bitterness. It was all behind me, and I was finally free of it. Some nights, Rebecca and I would sit and talk about the future, where we wanted to travel, what plans we had for the business, maybe even starting a family one day. It all felt so possible now. There wasn't any weight dragging me down. No chains pulling me back to the past. I had a new beginning, and it was everything I never thought I'd have again. As for Emma, she was just a memory, a mistake I had learned from, and that's all she'd ever be.